In this video, we're going to introduce pivot tables. Pivot tables allow you to calculate and analyze large sets of data, which can help you see patterns and trends in your data. There are a few things you want to do to the formatting of your data before you make your pivot table. You want to organize your data into columns, not rows. And you want to make sure all your columns have headers. And you also may want to convert your range to a table. Using a table will make adding new data easier, and it will reduce the maintenance you have to do if you're making multiple pivot tables. The first thing we're going to do is convert this range to a table. I'm going to press Ctrl-T on my keyboard, leave my table has headers checked, and click OK. Now that we have a table, we're going to go to the Insert tab and then look for the Tables group and click on Pivot Table. As you can see in the dialog box, it's selected the table for me. I have the option to put it into a new worksheet, or I can actually place it in an existing worksheet. I'm going to leave it on New and then click OK. After you've inserted the pivot table, you'll notice there's two tabs now at the top on our ribbon: Pivot Table, Analyze, and Design. If you're missing those contextual tabs, it's because you've clicked away from your pivot table. So just click back on it and the tab should appear again. Now you'll also notice there's a side pane called Pivot Table Fields. If you're missing the Pivot Table Fields pane, you can bring it back by going up to the Show group on Pivot Table Analyze and click on Field List. Now we need to add fields to our pivot table. We can check a box and allow Excel to put the field in, or we can just click on an item and drag it to where we want it. I'm going to drag date of sale to columns. Next, I'm going to drag state to rows, and I'm also going to put region there. Now you may have to experiment with the position of your fields because your data will shift and you might want it to display a different way. You can see when I move region above how it affects the column on this left side. If I move it back, you can see the appropriate change. The last field we're going to place into this pivot table is the quarter one. Now, when I drag quarter one to values, you can see it actually did a function where it added up all the sales. And you can see it fits within the months and within each state. Now you'll notice there's also expand and collapse buttons on the columns and the rows. So if you need to drill down and see more detailed information, you can expand things by clicking the plus sign and clicking the minus sign to collapse it. And we can also expand or collapse an entire row or column by right-clicking it and choosing the option Expand, Collapse, and expanding or collapsing the entire field. Now you may have noticed there's no formatting on the sum of quarter one sales. So I'm going to change that formatting Now, I'm going to right click one of the cells and choose Value Field Settings. Now in our dialog box, I'm going to go to Number Format, then choose the cell format I want, reduce the decimal, and click OK a couple times. You can also place different functions in your values. So to do this, I'm going to add Q1 one more time. To change the function from sum, I'm going to click the list arrow and choose Value Field Settings. And then I'm going to click on Minimum. And I'll also change the number format. Now I'm going to click OK, and you can see the minimum in that particular quarter is now displayed. And I'll do the same to put a maximum in there. If there's a field you don't need, you can drag that field back to the list, or you can click the list arrow and choose Remove Field. Now let's take a look at using a filter. So I'm going to move state to the filters. Now you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner, there is a drop down. So this works like the auto filter or a table filter. When you click on it, you get similar options that you'd get on other types of filters. So I can click on an item to highlight the one item, or if I want to select more than one, I can check this box and add more than one state. Now I'm going to get rid of this filter, so I should change the filter back to everything. Now you may want to take a deeper look at the underlying data. So I can point at one of the data sets and there's a pop-up that tells me a little bit more information about where this data comes from. Now I can also drill down deeper by simply double clicking on an item, and you can see it pulled up all the Alaska sales and placed it on another sheet. Let's take a look at slicers for a pivot table. Now, slicers are an easy graphical way to filter. To add a slicer, I'm going to go to Pivot Table Analyze on my ribbon. And then in the filter group, I'm going to click on Insert Slicer. Now, the two slicers I'm going to add are state and region. And then I'm going to click OK. Now, these can be moved like any object in Excel. And we can also expand your slicer by using the sizing handles. Now I'm going to go up to my ribbon to make this a little bit easier to use. Now you'll notice I have a slicer contextual tab. There's a buttons group, and I'm going to adjust this so there are more columns. As you can see, I can fit most of the states now just on this one screen. Now I'm going to move region lower so I can expand it a little bit more. Now the slicers are intuitive. If you want to see a specific state, you can click on the state and it will appear in your pivot table. If I want to select more than one, I can hold down Control and select more than one item. Now you can also do a multi-select by clicking this button here, but if you wanted to select one again, you have to deselect everything. So I usually like to use Control, but if you don't want to use the keyboard, you can use this multi-select here. I'm going to remove the filter from the slicers by clicking on Clear Filter. And if you no longer needed the filter, you can just highlight the filter and then press delete on your keyboard. The last thing we're going to look at is the function GETPIVOTDATA. So we're going to use that function to pull data out of our pivot table. Now I'm going to place that function in cell R4. So what I'm going to do is type in equals and then click on this particular cell right here. Now I'm going to press enter, and this formula pulls that data into this cell in column R. Now I want something a little more interactive, so I've created a list through data validation where I can select the state or the month. Now we need to change the function to actually do a cell reference instead of pointing at the specific state and month I selected. So I'm going to double click the cell. And as you can see, the state it's pulling is Arizona. So that's what I'm going to replace with a cell reference. So I highlighted everything from Arizona, including the quotation marks, and I'm going to change that to cell E4 to point to that cell. And I'm also going to change that number 1 for January to point to Q4, which is the month I have there. Now at this point, I can press enter. Now I'm going to click on the month dropdown and change this to December. And as you can see, it pulled up the December Q1 sales. I hope you found this useful. Thank you for watching.